I want y'all to look at this fish right here. 6.5 pounds. This fall transition, great when you find them. Secondary points, lipless crankbaits. Fantastic. What's up, y'all? Out here on the water, nice early day of fall fishing. Sun's rising, it's gonna be a little bit hot, but that water temp's still nice and cool, so that fall time of year is still in effect. It's arguably that fall transition, but no matter fall transition or fall, a bait I'ma always have tied on is gonna be a lipless crankbait. These lipless crankbaits or rattle traps, whichever name you prefer, are gonna be, in my opinion, the best bait to be thrown during this time of year, when it's either during that transition or already fall. But I'm gonna be throwing mainly these shad colors, because during this time of year, those bass are gonna be chasing bait, feeding up, trying to make themselves as fat as possible, and they're gonna be aggressive. They're gonna be non-stop feeding, so no matter time of day, early morning, midday, late at night, you can go out there and find some bass chasing bait. If you don't think they're chasing bait, they most likely are somewhere. When I'm looking for those bass chasing bait during this time of year, I'm gonna be looking in the backs of pockets where they might have shad pushed up, on top of points, like in the shallow part of it, or all the way extended on the end of the point on the ledges. And then if none of those three work for you, what you're gonna wanna do is go find them offshore. There's always gonna be a school of bait somewhere offshore, and usually this time of year, those bass are gonna be finding them and they're gonna be chasing them. These rattle traps, they're gonna be one of the best baits to be throwing to cover water. It's just a great search bait. You can launch those baits out, you can reel them however way you can show, which I'll go over here in a minute. But it's just cast after cast, and eventually you'll run into one. And if you don't run into one, if you just keep going, keep grinding, you'll find one. But the three main brands I'm gonna be throwing are gonna be the Googan Squad Clutch, the Bill Lewis Rattle Trap, and then my favorite of the three is gonna be the Strike King Red Eye. The Strike King Red Eye here, this is the 2-tap one. The 2-tap one is the one I would recommend if you're gonna get a Strike King Red Eye, because the 2-tap one has tungsten weights in it. What that tungsten's gonna do is when that bait's rattling and those weights collide, it's gonna make a different sound. As long as when you collide with a rock or a branch, it's gonna make that different sound, and that different sound to me makes bigger strikes, more strikes, and I'm gonna be putting more fish in the boat with that tungsten weight. But nevertheless, these two here, they don't have tungsten, and I still put big fish in the boat and still can go out there and catch them. But the main key for me is gonna be that shad color. That shad color is gonna be almost purely what they're feeding on. You can get away with the red, but what I like to do with the red bait during the fall is I kind of meet in the middle. This one here, it's a shad color with red on it. It's got red hooks and it's got painted red on the side of it. The color is gonna be bleeding shad, and that it kind of meets in the middle of that red bait and that shad color, which both of those colors are gonna be kind of the colors you wanna be throwing during this time of year. But when I'm throwing this bait, I'm gonna have 4 main retrieves, which I'll show right here. First main retrieve is just burning that bait. You're just gonna wanna launch that bait out there and burn it. This is gonna be the one you can cover the most water with. If the fish are feeding aggressively, like you see them busting, chasing bait fast, that's the one you're gonna want. Just casting it out there and just burning that bait in. You're gonna be able to cover way more water, make more casts, and those aggressive fish are gonna be keyed on that bait and hit it. Next one is, you're gonna keep that burning mentality. You're gonna burn it, but then you're gonna add pauses in. So those aggressive fish, they might be chasing it when it's burning, but they're not quite hitting it. What that pause is gonna do is gonna trigger a reaction strike. If those bass don't want it when you're just burning it, if you pause that bait, that's gonna cause a reaction, and that bass is oftentimes gonna strike that bait. Next one I'm gonna be throwing is a little bit more finesse. This is the one I'm mainly throwing on the edges of points, not on top of them, but just slow rolling that bait on the bottom. You're gonna wanna feel that thing pull up that ledge. You're gonna wanna tick the rocks, tick the branches. You're just gonna want that bait to collide with wherever you're fishing, or even just bring up right up along that edge of the point. Last cast I'm gonna be throwing is just yo-yoing it. You're gonna cast it out there, pick that rod tip up, and then reel it back down. Just keep doing that. What's that gonna do is when you pick that bait up like that, it's gonna vibrate and cause some pretty erratic movement within that bait. But then when you drop it, it's just gonna sink. And what's that gonna cause is that's gonna imitate a bait fish in distress. A bait fish in distress is gonna be something that the bass are gonna think is an easy strike. So they're gonna go get what they think's an easy meal, and they're just gonna strike that bait. But in the bags of pockets, I'm usually not gonna be throwing that yo-yo retriever, not always the slow one. The bags of pockets are usually where I'm gonna be casting that bait and just burning it, or burning and pausing. Because when they're usually pushing bait back in the edges of coves, they're gonna be just moving aggressively. They might even come out towards the edges of the pockets and coves, but they're gonna be chasing that bait quite aggressively. Unless you got spotted bass, of course. If you got spotted bass, those bass are gonna be chasing bait always. Those fish are gonna be aggressive, and with spotted bass, the lipless is actually gonna be a bait I'm gonna be throwing all year. But for those bigger largemouths, when they're on tops of points, I might be using all 4 of those retrieves, for example. But today, I found those fish all the way on the end of a point, and they were on the ledge, almost purely on the ledge of that point. So what I was doing was casting it down the point, and then just slowly reeling that bait up. What that was doing was when that bait was coming up that ledge, it would tick a rock, and as soon as it would tick a rock, that's when those bass would strike that bait. But that's pretty much all of it. Those 4 retrieves help. That's the 4 I throw. This is the bait I'm gonna be throwing. Whether it's whatever brand you prefer, like I said earlier, favorite brand's gonna be the Strike King Red Eye, the 2-tap one specifically. But these are arguably the best bait to be throwing during this fall time of year, and it's gonna be always tied on. It's always gonna be on my boat. It's almost always gonna be on one of my rods and in my hand. So I hope y'all learned something today, and hope y'all can go catch some big ones. If you like what you watched, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time.